going to now zoom in on the country where we are right now, France. And for this, I'd like to ask Elsa Merckel, Aymeric Ducrocq, Pierre Peysson, Guillain Chapelon, and Aurélie Klein to join me on stage, please. Please grab a microphone on the way. We're running a bit late. That might be the reason why they're not here. Hello. Can we get a microphone? We've got one. Hello. Good morning. How are you? Ça va? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, we're all there. Hello. Thank you for joining me. Sorry for the delay. So, first of all, Elsa Merckel, thank you for joining us today. You're the head of the Renewable Energies Department at France's energy regulator, La CRE. The CRE hands down, just as a reminder for the international audience, the CRE hands down recommendations on the criteria of ongoing offshore wind energy, renewable tenders, and other tenders, by the way, and on which tender candidates should be chosen or are the most suitable, actually. Your latest advice is on the 2 gigawatt tender number 9 that will be awarded next year. So, given that background, what's your take on the current French tender criteria? What's good, what's not so good about them?
Okay. Thank you for inviting the French regulator today first. For the CRE, what is important is really to ensure that both candidates and their bids are robust. We are in a context where development time are long, which implies more risks for the projects, where several projects have been cancelled in other countries, so it makes these considerations all the more important. So first, regarding pre-qualification criteria, indeed, we published recently our formal advice on the consultation document of tender 9, so the extension tender. It's 2.5 gigawatts wind farms, and we made 2 important recommendations regarding pre-qualification criteria. First, regarding financial capacities of the candidates, we recommended not only to consider not only turnover but also level of equity. Which is more relevant, we think, and regarding technical capacities, really to focus on projects from the candidates that are under construction or already commissioned, and not to take into account all their pipe of projects in development that can really be at early stage of development. So that's for pre-qualification criteria. And regarding now really the assessment of the bids that we are making, we have a quite strong recommendation, and the most important is really to strengthen the robustness criteria. Currently it's 5 points out of 100. We would like it to be strengthened so as to reach a 10 points rating. We think it's important to be sure that we can give points to candidates that are making reliable assumptions regarding the costs, regarding technology. So that's why we are pushing this. Then we also think that we can respect the 70% price criteria obligation we have from the European Commission, but that we could change the formula we use to calculate the price criteria, as it tends to make the non-price criteria all the more inefficient. And then finally, I would say that we think that there are a lot of criteria in the tenders, social criteria, environmental criteria, that could be transformed into strong obligations for candidates, and that would basically release some points for robustness criteria, but also maybe for European local content criteria. We have recommended to consider such criteria in the past, and we are ready to help the administration in the future to see what opportunities we can take from the implementation of the Net Zero Industry Act.
Do you feel that the French government is always taking into account your recommendation, has been taking into account your recommendations?
So we are making formal advice on the text, on several texts from the government, decrees, tender specification, but it is important to say also that we have very regular discussions with the French administration on these topics. We were pleased that several of our recent recommendations have been followed. There are discussions to increase the number of points given to the robustness criteria in the tenders 7 and 8. The minimum rating regarding robustness criteria has been increased in the recent tenders, because before you could have a bid that has a 40% grade and still not be eliminated. So that has changed in the next specifications. Other point is that we recommended in the past to include competitive clauses, so that if you have a big tender with several lots, you have limits on the number of lots that specific candidates can win. And we think it's quite important to diversify the sector in France, and we've also been followed on that, also on more technical topics. So of course we would like to be followed every time, but it's important also to have in mind that when the government asks us to deliver a formal advice, in the same time, frequently, they are also notifying the tender to the European Commission, so there are not a lot of margins for important changes. So we are frequently followed, but with delays, 1 or 2 tenders later, sometimes.
And given all what you just said right now, do you feel that there's a country that's doing more of what you just recommended? Is France looking to any other countries for inspiration?
Well, there are countries like Denmark, for instance, that are only relying on price criteria. Other countries like the Netherlands, for instance, that are considering more qualitative criteria, like integration to the energy system. In France, we are convinced that for the French tenders, we need to have such non-price criteria. For projects with fixed foundations, projects are mature. There are not a lot of differences between the price that are proposed by the candidates. So we think it's interesting to have other ways to distinguish the candidates, and there are still risky projects, so it's still important to assess their robustness. And for floating offshore wind, the sector is less mature, so it's all the more important to really assess what are the risks in the bids.
We all heard yesterday and today that France has been speeding up when it comes to offshore wind energy. There's much more in the cards. Do you feel that you, as an independent authority, are sufficiently staffed to deal with that workload? I understand your department is quite small, right?
Yeah, so indeed, the French minister has made several ambitious announcements in May, and regarding the crew, we think it's a good thing to accelerate in offshore wind. So it implies, of course, a heavy workload, because this summer we will have to instruct the 6th tender with the results that are foreseen for the end of the year. We will have to do normally the pre-qualification from tender 9 in several weeks. Then the analysis of the offer, if the schedule stays as it is, of tender 7, tender 8, beginning of next year, then tender 9. So yeah, it's a heavy workload, and of course, if you want to accelerate in offshore wind, it implies to adapt progressively resources from administrations. So crew resources, but also resources from other administrations regarding permitting, for instance. Regarding the crew, we are, of course, we are a small team, but we are relying on economic, technical, legal skills, and we are already fully mobilized to make this project move forward as quickly as possible.
Thank you very much, Elsa Merckel. Aymeric Ducrocq, you are Director of Marine Renewables at EDF Renewables. And I think you brought some slides, but first, would you like to comment on what you just heard?
Comment on the last topic?
On anything that she just said, on the tender criteria.
Yeah, well, on this, I mean, pretty everything that Elsa said, I think we are well aligned. The resources on the public side need indeed to be strengthened, no doubt about this. And the criteria is a major topic for the whole industry. We discuss a lot about this among us, with the government as well, with the CRE. And I think there is a strong alignment that indeed it should be some adjustment to strengthen the weight of robustness criteria to make sure the offers are reliable and can be delivered, and maybe reduce the weight that the purely price-based criteria have today. And I think it's a matter of time. Probably it will move in the right direction.
While we have you here, could you give us a quick overview of your projects that you're working on now? So we know about Saint-Nazaire and Fécamp that are in operation of France. What else is in the cards?
Yeah, Saint-Nazaire is already operational for more than 1 year. Fécamp was COD'd formally a couple of weeks ago, so we are now building another one in Normandy, in Calvados. It's called Courseulles, same capacity as the two previous ones. And we're also finishing the construction of a pilot floating project in the Mediterranean near Fos-sur-Mer. It's called Provence Grand Large. It's a 25 megawatt project.
Yeah,
so that's pretty advanced. I hope we can be delivered in October. And meanwhile, we're also working on the development of more early stages projects, Centre Manche Normandie and also Dunkirk on the north side of the country.
We earlier heard about the conditions, tender conditions for you, from your perspective. What are other big hurdles for offshore wind energy in France to take off?
Well, I think first I can speak about the hurdles, I'm fine, but I think we should first underline that the French market is very healthy in its design. The fact that developers come and can access at the same time a concession and a CFD, which is pretty strong, 20 years, fixed price, which the French state back up, is a very important element of strength in the way the market is designed. Also, the framework is healthy because the CFD is indexed against a series of risks. If you think of, industry prices, raw materials, the bid price will be indexed from bid date up to the FID. You're also protected against swings in interest rates. Then when you're operational, you're protected against inflation. So in a word, the balance of risk is right, in my opinion, is very well thought through, because the developers bear the risk of development, performance, construction risk, operation thereafter. But the macro risk that we can't control anyway, they are not for us. They are protected by the system. And I think this is a key feature that makes the French market very bankable, very investible, and that we should keep as it is, because this is something that we have right, and that makes the market very attractive, in my opinion. Then if you think of the hurdles, yes, there are some. I think it was discussed. It takes a very long time to get the tenders through. They tend to be late, and they tend to be slow. So that's a frustration for us. I think it's somehow related to the resources topic that Elsa mentioned. Yes, we need more civil servants, sorry to say so, but they can be very useful. And also the permitting process is quite heavy, quite complex, and this is an element where we can make progress probably.
EDF Renewables is very active in France, but you're also looking obviously at other markets. Would you like to pick one and talk a bit more about one international market?
With pleasure. We are present in several markets in Europe, UK, Belgium, and we are looking into others. And we're also in the US, and that's why I brought this map, China, but also the US. And I would like to pick the US because obviously it's a major market for global players such as us, or RWE, or Total, or other European players. We are present on the East Coast, in New York and New Jersey. We are partnering there with Shell, and we have basically a 4 gigawatt cluster that is still under development, but a very large potential. And I picked this one because it illustrates quite well the opposite side of what I said about the French market. We, the French, we are often said we are arrogant and we give lessons, but I really want to stress that it's an area where the French have been right from the beginning, that yes, the market is well thought. And if you look at the US market, I think this is the head of the offshore development of Avangrid, who said a couple of months ago the US market is broken. I don't think it's broken. I think it will be a very large and attractive market, but it has been dramatically slowed down because the right risk protections were not in place. And I think, I mean, we have all of us, we've heard about the projects being called off and taking a couple of years of delay. And that was a major setback, I think, for the whole industry. And this illustrates, how the market should be balanced in terms of who bears which risk.
Yeah, we heard yesterday obviously from Sam Solastro from the Oceanic Network in the US that he's hoping that that might change very soon. Thank you very much. Aymeric Ducrocq from Media for Renewables.
Thank you.
Now, Guillain Chapelon. Hello.
Hi.
You are country head and general manager France and at developer Skyborn. Your company is co-owner with EDF Renewables of the Fécamp and Calvados or Courseulles project. What other markets are you active in a nutshell?
Yeah, first, thanks for inviting me. I'm very pleased to be at Seanergy. Indeed, we are partner with EDF and AIH on Fécamp and Calvados. And we are present in Europe, in Germany, our home market, Sweden and Finland, also in APAC, Taiwan, Korea and Australia, and recently in the US.
We, at the beginning of this session, heard from Madame Merckel, and she was talking about French tender criteria. What's your take on France's way of doing offshore things?
If I may, talk a little bit about the elephant in the room. I quite agree with Aymeric when he's saying that all the things about the market, the indexation and the CFD, but at the end of the road, I don't think that right now we have an healthy market. If we look at the results of AO5, we had a first bid that was 35% below the 5 remaining bids. 35%. Here is draw. Then we have an awardee that is 25% below the remaining 4 bids. If you look at the analysis of the Creux, they say they don't believe in the turbine and they don't believe in the capex. We are working in offshore wind. I mean, it's very capex intensive, and if you don't have a turbine, it's difficult. So, yeah, we have protection. I fully agree, but still, I'm not sure that the market right now is healthy enough. It's a big issue because we have very high risk project, and at the end of the road, it's an issue for the industry, for the ports, for the SMEs, but also for the state, because we need this project. We need these electrons at the end of the road. So from our perspective, there's 2 things that we should implement. I would go further than the Creux. I don't think we need all these criteria that we have. It should be prerequisites. The state can define with the industry, with the supply chain, what is the path, and it's not up to the developer to kind of take that risk. And the second aspect is to strengthen a lot the robustness criteria to allow the Creux to disregard too aggressive prices. If you are 25, 35% below the rest, if you have a turbine, I don't know, 15, 20% bigger than the rest of the competition, you should be kicked out.
Right. That might help as well to diversify the results a bit, I imagine.
Yes, of course, and for that we fully agree with the analysis of the Creux. What might help is first what they have started this multi-gigawatt tender. It's a necessity. Having a project by project is not a solution, and the timing is way too long for the developer. And by the way, it's very costly for the developers. And then, to take again the US market, so I agree that on some aspects the market is broken, but I think that the idea there to have one awardee, a developer can only win one project, so that they are focused to develop this project, is a good way to de-risk also this project. They have issue on the other side, but on this aspect, it's a very good thing.
You just mentioned the tenders looking ahead, which are likely to be bigger here in France. Do you think that the conditions to have these big tenders in France are met, or are there any specific challenges that the government and the market need to overcome?
I think that the state, the Creux, the DGSE have done a tremendous work over the past 2 years to kick off this multi-gigawatt tender, and that's a great thing. We are coming to an end of that. We have started to define all the area, and so we will launch the study, and this project will start. I think the real topic as of now is we need to depoliticize offshore wind, so that we ensure that we don't have this stop and go depending on the political aspects. I think we have made quite clear over the past years that we need this project, we need these electrons, and depoliticizing offshore wind is a necessity if we want to move forward.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Guillain Chapelon. Let's bring in a foreign developer's perspective with you, Pierre Peysson. Good morning.
Good morning.
You are head of offshore wind France at Germany's RWE. Now, the RWE so far hasn't won any French offshore wind farm bids, but you are still adamant that you'll participate in all the upcoming tenders here in France. Why is the French market so interesting or important for you?
Yeah, so we arrived in France 3 years ago. The offshore wind market is first not only French, it's a European market. And as a European player, we are positioned in each European countries. We have very potential. I will come on what makes France an interesting country. But I mean, the German market is not reverse for the Germans. We also lose auction there. Same for UK. It's not only for the Brits, or in Netherlands, not only for the Dutch company. So I think that's quite natural to see French companies and foreign companies jumping in the French market. Why? Because in terms of potential, when we have a look about the space available, if we make a comparison with Germany and Netherlands, that's 5 to 6 times bigger. So if you add on that the wind regime, the technology approach where you can develop bottom fixed but also floating, and with what you said, Aymeric, regarding the support mechanism that is based on the two-sided CFD with indexation for 20 years, that makes France a very interesting country. So that's quite natural. We see lots of players jumping in the French market to really position themselves in the bid. What has changed also over the last years, I would say 5 years, since Ducrocq on the bid with a price of 44, that was a demonstration that offshore wind can be competitive in France, which was absolutely not a given regarding the first projects. And we can come on regarding these first projects because the price was much bigger, but I mean, it's not so important when we have a look about the benefits, the factories, the jobs, etc. So this is, in my view, a parallel to be done with the floating market, which is an emerging market. And where do we want to go for floating in France, and to find the right balance between competitiveness and assurance that the project will be realized and some French companies will be able to jump in. But coming back to the visibility, now we have a huge visibility. I mean, so there is lots of auctions going. There is, I think, 3 auctions. There's the 09, which is supposed to be launched. If I refer, I think that was not in Nantes, but Last edition, the former minister Agnès Pannier-Runacher announced that the AO9 will be launched very, very soon.
Paris, the last.
But I think we need to improve regarding the very, very soon. It depends for us. German, very, very soon. It's 1 or 2 weeks. In France, sometimes very, very soon could be in 12 or 24 months. But the volume is there. The maritime spatial planning is also engaged. I think yesterday we have the reports after the public hearings mentioning where the suitable zones could be defined. And I think that's what was missing in France is the zone definition, because after AO9 there is no zones that has been identified so far. So with this AO10, roughly 10 gigawatts on zone that we need to pick up. That's where I think France has improved. And the pragmatic approach, I mean, we used to probably in the past consider offshore wind as an issue when it comes to politics. As of today, I think it's very pragmatic. And the pragmatic thing is that we need electricity generation. We need electricity that is cheap. If the electricity can contribute also to the industrialization, which is the case for France, and when we have a look about the electricity increase from now to 2035, that's between 25% and 30%, based on our 460 terawatt hours, so that's massive increase. And our 18 gigawatts of targets that has been agreed on a sector deal we signed with the state 2 years ago will allow to fill the gap significantly for more than the half. So that's where I think this pragmatic approach is very well appreciated, and we do expect that it will still remain in the coming weeks and months.
So you just talked about why the market is interesting. What are France's weak points?
I was mentioning the delay. That's
yeah.
Obviously that's just crazy.
That's the only one?
That's I think probably that's crazy, but that's a demonstration that all the French colleagues are very resilient, and they probably also pretty much managed to convince the board that the auction is coming, or the final tender rules are coming, and we're going to deliver a bid. So just very quickly, when we have a look about the energy plan, which is really ongoing, and the plan set, and the reality, we have deviation of 2 to 3 years, which is, quite, I think, significant and quite unique when you have a look about the offshore wind market in Europe. The duration of the auction is just significant. We could have conceived that for Ducrocq, the AO3, which was a dialogue. So first time we engaged a discussion between the state and the developers to really define and refine the auction rules. This dialogue lasts for 3 years. We could have imagined that for the next one it could be pretty much easier and shorter. That was absolutely not the case. So we really need to engage simplification in our procedures. And so that's before the auction. I think we need to probably improve. And we also probably need to improve and accelerate post-auction, because what is difficult in a French market is to really put a price. So you mentioned, Aymeric, like the 3-in-1. So we have a price, we have the lease, we have the grid connection, which is secure, which is, I think, very, very nice. But we have a long distance between the award. So the date when you say, I'm going to fix a price, even if it's X euro per megawatt hour, and the time we will pass FID and then COD. The distance is very long, and that's very challenging. I think that's where, in terms of assumptions, in terms of CapEx, OpEx, especially, it could be very tricky for the crew and for other players also to find the right balance. And in my point of view, we are in an environment where in the past there are no projects that has been abandoned. What was like a threat but never happened. That's quite different as of today. We have already examples, and the worst thing in France would be to award projects with promises, with investments in the ports, etc., but finally with difficulties in terms of realization. And we'll only see, in 27, 28, 29, if finally these projects that has been awarded will be realized. We hope it's going to be realized. There is no reason they are not going to be realized. I'm just saying that the race to the bottom, how the auction are designed, is not sustainable at all. And that's also quite unique. So we need to work on this simplification, modification of the auction rules, on the robustness. We need also probably to support the regulators, the GSE, just to mention that they are absolutely brilliant. They are, I think, from my point of view, working also a lot, but there's just a lack of resources. We are speaking about the biggest investments of industrial projects in France, just the biggest, billions of euros, and there's only a couple of brilliant team working, assessing the offers, and we need probably to hire more people there.
Do you think that there is one point France could learn something from another country when it comes to the criteria, for example?
I would say yes and no. Yes, because as you mentioned, Elsa, there is in the Netherlands, this country where we have been successful in an auction with a particularity that was not only producing electricity from offshore wind and developing an offshore wind farm. The offshore wind farm is more than 700 megawatts, but the auction design was made to go for a system integration. So it's not only producing, but it's also matching also the demand. And then we have proposed several equipments, such as electrolyzers, batteries, solar floating, combination of offshore wind and solar, etc. So that was non-price criteria based on that one. I would say, so yes, in this sense, I would say also no, because there is no countries that manage to really introduce non-price criteria without increasing significantly the risk on the projects and cost burden. So we need to be very careful when it comes to go for non-price criteria, because you can easily go with a project that is in practice seems to be very, very nice, but in reality will never be realized, because there's always a reality in terms of finance. If you land to a negative NPV, the projects will never be realized. And that's where, especially in some northern countries, there are less and less bidders when it comes to full merchant, which is the case in the Netherlands, because there is markets going down. So when you have a look about the spot market, is very, very low, I mean, and there is inflation, so that's difficult to find a balance. And if you add on top some additional investments, environmental information, which is absolutely important, that makes difficult the business case. So next step for France will be really to go for definition of non-price criteria. I quite well agree with what you say, Guillain, regarding the non-price criteria as of today, that are absolutely useless, because all candidates scores the points that needs to be scored, so just put them as a prerequisite, and that's done, and just concentrate on some specific criteria, and pretty much support less criteria, but well designed, very well designed, and a lot of points on the robustness, because we are an industry where it's a lot about capital intensive, very much capital intensive, very much dependent on the technicalities of the site. So we need to increase, so we even be more ambitious of the 10 points. We probably double these parts, and think about the resilience. So resilience can be approached across several ways: CO2, local content, capex, percentage of capex, maximum capex outside of GPA countries, etc. So there's still discussions ongoing, but we need probably to fix something there, keeping in mind that we should design this non-price criteria so that we can be sure that can be matched, and we will not be in a situation where in practice that's wonderful, but in reality that's just impossible.
Okay. Thank you so much, Pierre Peysson from RWE. We also have Aurélie Klein with us. Hello, good morning.
Hello.
You're a marine renewables energy and offshore wind project manager at France's O&M provider Valemo. What's your take? Is this watershed where the French offshore wind energy market will finally go through the roof?
Well, thank you for inviting us to speak today. Well, we have seen definitely a takeoff of offshore wind in France with the construction and startup of Saint-Nazaire in 2022. So now some volume has raised through Fécamp, Saint-Brieuc, Courseulles, and now coming in the years to come, Noirmoutier et Dieppe-le-Tréport. So that has raised some volume for France. France is now definitely on the map of offshore wind in Europe. And the supply chain has responded well, so we have been preparing and working upstream to be able to address this market. The construction phases are very intense in terms of workload and in resources to be mobilized, so we have been able to respond to that and to adapt to this intense workload. But now we are seeing that waiting for Dunkirk will be a few years of smaller work and calmer phases. So we need to also prepare for that, even if maintenance activities will be on the table, and we will be performing maintenance on the existing farms, but there will be a stop in construction for a few years that will impact the supply chain.
And what would be a way to bridge that construction gap?
Well, in order to face this huge amount of workload for the past years and for the ongoing years, we've been collaborating with the supply chain. The supply chain has been able to set some partnerships in order to join forces and address this workload. So now this also gives us some new opportunities. For instance, for Valemo, we've been associating with RES to address maintenance on Saint-Brieuc wind farm. We've been working with P and Service Voltage through a partnership on Provence Grand Large and Courseulles, where we will perform the maintenance. But that gives us also, we can take each other on new opportunities, so that can bridge a bit this gap. And we definitely look abroad also to take opportunities internationally. As Pierre just mentioned, it's definitely a European market, and we have the chance in France to have a strong implementation of industrials in offshore wind. We have nacelle factories, we have blade factories, we have an offshore substation yard in Les Chantiers de l'Atlantique. So these industrials can also take the supply chain with them on their project. We've been working in Germany for Les Chantiers de l'Atlantique, etc. So this is a way also to continue and to fill this gap where French market will be a bit less active.
And just finally, what's your take as a supplier, or from the supplier's perspective, on the French tender criteria, what we heard earlier from Madame Merckel?
Yeah, so we definitely are in line with the developers and the Commission de Régulation de l'Énergie in terms of price cannot be the only criterion. Definitely it can be the directing element for taking the decision, because as a supply chain and as maintenance and operators, we are at the last step of the project, and if the prices have been drawn down to the minimum, then we cannot feed ourselves basically, and it's a loss for everyone. And not speaking of the project that cannot exist and be realized because the costs have been too low. So definitely price cannot be the only aspect to be considered. Technical robustness is a good thing, is a good approach. That can be also, the supply chain can be mobilized in that also, because maybe letters of interest from companies, from local companies, can be also gathered to prove that the resources exist and the skills exist to confirm a technology or methodology of installation, of operation, etc. So the supply chain can be a part of this also confirmation of the technological choices that are made by the developers. And we see also that acceptability, although I agree pragmatically, we cannot say we don't need offshore wind. We know, all of us here, of course, but even we know, everyone knows that we need offshore wind for the energy transition, etc. but still there is an issue of acceptability. We can see it those days. So we need to put that in the balance also, and to ensure that the local impact is sufficiently evident to make it acceptable. We need to include social and environmental considerations to make sure that it's sustainable and that we are less subject to political considerations at the end.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for your insight, and thank you for listening.